So, believe it or not, this is the first Just a Guy Thinking Out Loud podcast, I guess you can call it. For a few months now, handful, almost a year at this point, I've been putting out content, trying to, I guess, uplift whoever found it, sharing knowledge. But, you know, there's only so much you can share in like a 30-second, minute and a half clip. So, I figure why not. But before we get into that, so you have a little bit of context, I am a millennial, clearly. Exactly, you'll figure out eventually. But married, 3 kids, who knows if more will come. Blue collar currently, but I've worked white collar, I've worked green collar. For those that don't know, that means I'm a veteran. And I've seen a lot of the same interactions repeated regardless of what environment I'm in. Be it in a bank, or in a restaurant, or in a barrack somewhere. It's surprisingly a lot of the same. Similar archetypes, different characters, different situations, but similar feel. It's funnier than you would think when you're comparing like a third-year apprentice to like a butter bar, and they're both just equally as lost in the situation. It's funny to me. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about today, what I've noticed is, at least I've noticed a few things, but specifically today, a lot of men end up being stuck in one way, shape, or form. And a lot of times they might not even be aware that they are. So I wanted to speak a little bit to that today and see if we can kind of peel back the curtain for some of you guys. A lot of guys don't realize that they're stuck, because stuck doesn't feel different from being unstuck unless it's something that you're really actively pursuing. Then of course it feels like the world's ending, but stuck feels very normal. You know, it does have some signs though. Not that you would call them that, but things that if you notice these patterns, these are signs that you might in fact be stuck. If you keep running into the same problems, regardless of where it is in your life, you keep running into the same types of problems over and over again, the same types of arguments, or different people are giving you the same type of reaction when they see you coming. If you got an attitude about the same category of things, you know, you got a trigger point, and every time somebody mentions, you know, the phone bill, you start losing it. And if you are ostensibly hard-headed when it comes to one or two topics, you have to understand at some point you're not just like, that's just your preference. No, you're just completely shut down your ability to hear anything counter to your opinion on that one topic. These are signs. If it sounds familiar to you, I'm here to tell you, you're stuck. You're stuck on what that thing is, which is fine. You can stay stuck if you want to, but if you like to get past it, stick with me. Nobody wants to feel like they're doing time. You know what I mean? If you're trying to build towards a family, or you're trying to build towards becoming a manager, or you're trying to build an asset, a company, whatever it is, you're not going to want to go about that like you would a prison sentence. You don't want to feel like you have to toil every day, and it's hard work and it's thankless work, and at the tail end of it you just get to breathe a little bit more freely. That's not the purpose. You want to feel like you are feeling lighter every day because what you're building is helping lift that weight off your shoulders. So let's dive a little bit deeper into it. Everybody's got their sticky points, right? And it's your job to know what yours are. You know, if you haven't heard it before, you're an adult, figure it out, you know? And then that way, at least if somebody says something that you don't like, you can tell them, yo, I don't want to talk about it. You know, go F yourself, get away from me. But you can be very clear that you don't want to talk about that, and it's their job to accept your clearly defined emotional explanation as to why you don't want to speak. Understanding your triggers will tell you where you're stuck. They will allow you to highlight exactly what it is you have to peel back to figure out why it is that you're stuck. Because if that's where you're losing control, that's where you need to look. Because I was thinking about this topic while I was trying to convince myself to finally pull the trigger and start, doing this podcasting thing. I was talking to a bunch of guys. I had a really cool conversation with one guy, and then I had another interesting conversation with the second guy. This is the second guy. I was mentioning to him about going to a chiropractor to be able to help loosen up, his joints, his bones, all that stuff, get some space back in his spine, because he had said, I heard him saying a moment ago that his body was killing him, and he was always working so hard. So with very little prompting, he told me about something that happened 5 years ago, and he was throwing up all this cement board in bathrooms, and he was working with another dude that wasn't doing like much of anything. So almost to show that he didn't need him, he started going even harder. He did a bunch of work, but he never quite felt right afterwards. Which, if anybody's going to a chiropractor, they can tell you, oh yeah, you probably jacked something up and you probably just need to adjust it so your body stops trying to correct, and then your body can start to loosen the tension, all that stuff. So, and the guy, he's not a dumb guy. I mean, most guys in the trades, even if they don't seem to be the smartest tools in the bag, you got to be smart enough to be able to follow simple instructions. So I'm not going to say there aren't dumb people in the trades, because there certainly are, but I'd say more than 70% of them are smart enough, at least with common sense, that they picked up a few tips and tricks over the years. This guy knows that there is benefit in going to a chiropractor, but he has chosen the mantra of ride it till the wheels fall off. So what that means is he's not going to go to the chiropractor any more than he's going to go to the mechanic to put oil in his car. The way he lives his life is, I don't care how much it whines or complains, until it breaks, I'm not fixing it, including his body. I don't share that thought process, but what I do understand is a man has a right to choose how it is that he wants to live his life. I don't necessarily understand why that man would then turn around and complain about the aches and pains, but I'm not stuck in that way. That's his thing. And I'm not even saying he's stuck. That's his choice that he made. I just know that the outcome that he's getting from that sort of mindset isn't doing his body doing his body any good. And I'd much rather feel better at the end of the day than worse. But I think it's a good way of highlighting that even when you're mindful of whatever your trigger or one of your sticking points is, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fix itself. There's still work that you would have to choose to take in order to address those things. And I can respect, consistency, and I can respect, staying true to your own moral code, sense of integrity, but I still have to choose. I have to decide whether or not I want that type of energy around me. I don't know if it's contagious. I like going to the gym and working out. I don't know if I want to start having stuff feel like it wants to fall off. It is difficult though. Like I said before, being stuck doesn't always feel like failure. It can feel very normal. And normalizing being stuck is probably the reason why a lot of people are dealing with and just putting up with being stuck nowadays. A lot of people accept a lot more stuff than somebody else in their shoes would accept, because they're conditioned, or they've over time conditioned themselves to be a recipient of that kind of behavior. Once you become aware of it and you choose to change it, now you're starting to move in the right direction. So for what I've seen, there's 5 reasons, right? Yeah, say 4 or 5 reasons why people mostly stay stuck. Comfort is by far the biggest one, because once you get to a point where you don't need to get up and get after it every morning to fight for the next meal, it's very easy just to sit back on your laurels and just kind of, let life happen to you. You don't really have to push anymore. Then, of course, your ego will keep you stuck, because it won't let you admit that you're wrong. And then if you don't admit you're wrong, you won't be able to adjust your behavior in a way to fix whatever is wrong about you, because everybody has something wrong about them. Nobody's perfect. Then some people are stuck because they choose it, like the dude I was talking about before. And other people are, I want to say they're waiting, for the situation to fix itself, and because they're waiting, they're really avoiding taking responsibility for being able to get themselves out of the situation. It's not, they're victims to their circumstance, and they're not willing to step up in their circumstance to change it in a way. They might be waiting for the right time to take action, or they might be waiting for approval to take it, either from a spouse or from themselves, from a boss. They might need to be properly motivated, or they might have something that's holding them back. They might feel like they're restricted in some way so that they can't move forward, but it's not patience, it's not positioning. Most of the time it ends up being fear, unless you actually have something physically holding you back, it's fear most of the time. So, you got to get past it, got to be brave. Because if you want to actually get unstuck, it's not complicated, it's just hard. It's definitely not easy. Depending on how stuck you are and what you're stuck on, you can take, I don't know how many years of therapy with somebody working with you to unpack stuff, but not everybody can afford therapy. So what can you do to start to at least recognize where you are, to see how much of a repair job you have to do, right? If you're a guy like me, you like to Google most of your issues before you start taking it to a mechanic, because mechanics charge for their time. If you can Google it and you can narrow it down, maybe it's something you can fix. And then if you can't figure it out, then you like to call your boy that's a mechanic and say, yo, this is what I'm experiencing. Let them tell you what's happening. And only then are you going to take it to a mechanic, right? So how about we start with the entry level, Google level, right? How do I identify where I'm stuck? How do I get past it, right? What do I start to do? Obviously, being brave is one part of it, but it really it's four things that you got to think about when you're thinking about getting unstuck. So like I said, there's four things that you're thinking about when you're trying to truly get unstuck from a habit, from a situation, from whatever it might be. Ownership, discipline, truth, and action. Any one of those things missing is gonna cause you to be stuck a little bit longer, and I'll explain why. If you don't take ownership of what you can control in your circumstance, and you're always going to be a victim to your circumstance. So the initial thing you have to do after being aware of it is owning your part in it. Be it your job, your body, your relationship, your friends, your kids, a situation that happened in the past, whatever it might be, own your part in it. Like a man, if you did the crime, be willing to do the time. That's really what it comes down to. Beyond that, you have to have the discipline to stop negotiating with yourself on things that you're telling yourself are non-negotiable. If you tell yourself you want to lose the weight, lose the flipping weight. It's not that difficult once you start, but it's always going to be that much more difficult if you keep negotiating every morning. If you tell yourself you're going to do it, do it. That's discipline. Simple. Do not ever start lying to yourself in this process. You can lie to others, and that's not right either. But if you're lying to yourself, you're going back to before step 0, which is being aware of what your situation is. I like to reference a mirror. It doesn't have to be a physical one. It could be a metaphysical. But when you look at a mirror, it shows you exactly what is in front of it. Nothing more, nothing less. A lot of times people like to do mental gymnastics when they're thinking through situations or whatever it might be. Don't get away from the truth. Not when you're making your decisions, all right? Be 100% truthful, at least with yourself. And then at least when you're making a decision, you know what the likely reactions to your actions are going to be. Which brings me to action. Once you've taken ownership, you're disciplined, you're still dealing in truth, now you actually have to take actions to make yourself unstuck. It's not a matter of learning more about what other people that are in your situation have done to get out of it. A little bit of that helps when you're first becoming aware and you're doing all that initial entry level stuff, but that's only possible steps that you can take to fix your situation. You won't know what steps you need to take until you actually start taking them. So action is, while it's the last step, in order of the 4 I just listed, it's arguably the most important, because without you taking action, nothing will actively start changing with your control. That's interesting. I figured out the idea, or I wrestled with the idea of being stuck younger than some. I'm definitely not than all, certainly not most, but younger than some. And I guess I had to figure out what kind of person I would be in that situation earlier, because I really had no choice, basically. I was in between a rock and a hard place. When I was in college the first time, I messed up big time, because it was my first foray as being an adult, young adult, away from home, doing all the fun stuff, some of the responsible stuff, but more of the fun stuff than anything else. Got way too distracted and ended up failing out on my first college. Not that I would admit it to myself, because I kept lying. And I'm smart enough that I can keep rationalizing, oh, okay, if I just got this many B's and this many C's, I can bring up the GPA. No. It was too little too late, because once you turn too far when you're on a journey somewhere, you only have so much fuel to get you where you were supposed to go. So if you can't recorrect your course early on, after that mishap, then you're going to end up going a completely different area. You're either going to have to turn back and go back to where you came from, or land wherever it is you're going and then try to figure out there. And at least in my specific situation, I went back to where I came from, which is back home. And when you go back home and you fail out of a school that costs not only you money directly, but also your parents money and their loans as well to help support you in school, are you still your parents' kid? Yeah. But are you still a kid? No. You're not. I was younger than some. Might be. Most would come home at like 20. I was a little bit younger when I went to college. So I came back at 19, but whereas I left to school with the expectations of doing all the same I did, in high school and elementary school before that and all that stuff, while it started out that way in college, it very quickly changed because of what I was putting in. Academically, everything else was going fine. Socially, it was fine. Athletically, it was still fine somehow. But what I was supposed to do, my responsibilities, fell by the wayside. And that reset took about 6 months of real life time, from going through the process, getting the letters, actually accepting that I was, kicked out, having to call home and actually admit it out loud, and then having the, what are you talking about? Because of course you don't really share the bad parts of your life when you're drowning. Most people don't, even if you're squared away like I was. Even if you have open doors of communication like I had. It's the ego. I have an acronym that I think of every time I hear the word ego. It's it's edging God out. You don't want to do that, clearly. You want to be able to stay humble and be able to hear when your thoughts are sounding crazy to yourself. Everybody has had a thought and then caught themselves and like, yo, where did that thought came from? I cannot do that. Yeah, if you keep having those thoughts enough, they might start to sound like yours. So you just got to slow it down, pray a little bit. Either way, it took me 6 months, and after that, started working in a restaurant, started going to community college, really just started to figure out, okay, if I can't go, I was going to be an engineer at my first college, right? If I can't go that route anymore because I'm not in high school anymore, I'm not applying to all these colleges anymore, I got what I have immediately accessible to me at like very low cost, because I'm an unemployed 19-year-old at that time. That moment let me know that I could have chosen to stay stuck in that circumstance and let that temporary situation let me stay in that mindset of failure, figure it out, can't do it. Or I could say, F it, I messed up, figure it out, move forward, which I did and still continue to do. Some people never got that lesson, or when God was trying to teach them that lesson, they, turned left instead of turning right, and kept making a bunch of lefts and never thought of turning to the right. Well, here's my invitation to you. Turn right. Sometimes you gotta do something a little bit different to try to reset your internal thought process. And this is your invitation. If you're still feeling like you're stuck, or this is pulling a little bit of motivation up from inside you to try to do something different, then identify, or if you haven't already, identify where it is that you're stuck and commit to doing something a little bit different today. Because you don't need to stay where you are. A circumstance is not meant to be permanent unless you choose to be. Everything is temporary, right? Except death. All right, that might have gone too deep, I'm sorry. But seriously, if you're stuck, it's not permanent, but it is your responsibility if you don't want to be stuck anymore. Your parents aren't going to save you if you're a younger man than I. Again, millennial, so probably younger. And for the guys that are my age, your parents aren't going to freaking save you, bro. No, you shouldn't be living at home anymore. Late 20s, early 30s. Yes, houses are expensive. You can still buy them. Be willing to move. Be willing to fix them up yourself. Pick up a skill set. I don't speak on things that I haven't done. Everything I just said, I've done. I've done it as an apprentice, making... We bought our first house. I was an apprentice making $15.50 an hour. And we bought it in New York, in Queens. It's doable. And, well, this isn't right now, but not long ago. 9-10 years ago, something like that. You know what I mean? Be willing to get uncomfortable. Anyway, different conversation, different day. Your environment definitely matters. So if you are in a situation where you know you want to change, but everybody around you is doing the same old nonsense, you have to figure out in whatever way you can to get yourself out of that situation. And if it's not in a permanent way, get yourself away from that situation as many hours in the day you can until you can affect a change in your life dynamic, because the environment will drag you down. If you were a crab in a barrel with a bunch of other crabs, you ain't getting out of there. And lastly, you can change. Anybody can change, right? But only if you want to. Nobody can motivate you to change. I learned that in the military. I learned that in basic training. You cannot tell somebody to do something and they're going to do it unless they want to do it. Doesn't matter if you're yelling, you're screaming. If you have a dirtbag Blue Falcon battle buddy in basic that doesn't want to carry his weight, he will be a dead weight. That is what it is. Literally a sack of useless meat next to you that can't do anything at the bare minimum level. Again, I had one of those in basic, so I can speak on it very, very clearly. And if you happen to see this, I still don't like you, Mitchell. Either way, you have to be wanting to change, and you have to take that motivation and use it if it sparks it in you, all right? Because you can change. So take that power, let that light a fire inside you of change, and let you be a different version of yourself tomorrow than you woke up today. Because all it is little steps over time. You don't have to do a massive change. You don't have to change zip codes. You don't have to change bank accounts overnight. But what you can do is start taking steps in the direction that will lead you to the destination that you want over time. All right? I'm just a guy, and I guess the whole purpose is thinking out loud so you guys can peer into it. So hopefully it helps. God bless, and I'll see you guys next time.